because I've still have never done any tree work. I've never gone up in a bucket. I still don't know how to start a chainsaw, so I don't know how helpful I'll be, but I'll give it my best shot.
Landon Mance is a financial planner and co-founder of Backbone Planning Partners. He helps business owners plan successful exits and align their personal and professional goals. When he's not working, he's a twin dad, golf lover, and dedicated to giving back in Las Vegas.
The only formula that I can articulate in words is 50 to 100 hours. You need to spend 50 to 100 hours with a person doing numerous different things to really get to know them, to understand how they act in different situations, circumstances, experiences.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Brewing Business with Brady. Today's guest is Landon Mance. Landon, wonderful to have you, brother.
Yeah, thanks, man. Really appreciate it. It's been too long since we've caught up, man. So we get to catch up and record a pod at the same time. So it's all good.
Absolutely. I'm excited too because right before this we were talking a bit about family and it is that time of year. We actually did an episode earlier today, and the other guy and me both had sweaters on, and so that tells everybody what time of year we're in too, right? So that's a good thing because just a couple of days here in Houston, it was 80 degrees and with 80% humidity, so it felt like summer. So I'm glad to finally wear a sweater. But we were talking, you and I a bit about family, and then some of the questions we have slated for today to get to know more about what you're doing in life and business is geared towards family. So I'm hoping we can dig into that a little bit further, and because you do have a lot going on regarding as being a business owner, as being a family man. So excited to dive in, man.
Yeah, man. Yep. I'm an open book, man. So I'm willing to go in whatever direction you take me in.
I am a coffee addict at heart. I usually drink about 3 to 4 cups a day, but we always like to ask our guests, like, how do you start your day? What's in your mug to start a day to get things going right?
You may see me sipping on, this is my afternoon go-to beverage. We'll talk about that maybe, but so like you, man, so I'm 40. So for the last, probably 20, 22 years, I also have been a major coffee addict, drinking coffee multiple times throughout the day. My wife and I would brew decaf coffee in the evenings all the time. And then on October 1st, I actually cold turkey gave up coffee.
Oh.
So now my new morning thing is called Perk.
Okay.
It is think of like it's a protein powder with other nutritional things in it. And by the way, it's got, like 100 milligrams of caffeine per scoop.
Sweet.
Yeah. So that's my new thing is Perk.
I had not heard of Perk before. That it's pretty interesting that, I feel like if we had asked this question 30 years ago, or even just 10 to 20 years ago, most people's drink would have been coffee. But I'm experiencing with most guests on the show that coffee is the absolute minority, and there are a ton of different things that people are drinking in the morning to get their day started now.
Probably not necessarily a good thing. Coffee is from the earth, and all the other crap that we are putting in our bodies is not. So, but yeah, that's interesting, man. Yeah, I would think that most people would just say a cup of coffee, but
no, it's actually, I've heard a lot. I need to try, because one of our previous guests, they were doing AG1. Have you heard of AG1?
I have heard of that. Never had it though.
Yeah, I heard it doesn't taste that great, but she absolutely, it's a good friend. And she said that she hasn't been sick in years since she started taking that because of all the probiotics, prebiotics, and the dried greens and stuff. So I may have to do that. So
yeah,
we'll
interesting.
Yeah.
Let me ask one clarifying question.
Yeah.
Does she have children younger than 8?
Yes, she does. Actually, both.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So she does. So that's worth its weight in gold when she gets to say it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
No question, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
No question.
Kind of speaking of that, because you and I are business owners, right? And I speaking to this, that this is the season too when I feel like the kids are just bringing junk home from school and you're just going through cycles throughout the house of the wintertime of, yeah, any outside appointments and business meetings you're having to cancel because you're sick and you haven't gotten sleep, right? You know, dealing with little sick little ones. But kind of on this theme, you're a dad to twins. You got one on the way. How do you balance the demands? And for our audience to understand, big part of the reason we wanted Landon on the show, um, we Landon owns multiple different businesses, right? And I'm really interested to understand how you're balancing, being a family man, little ones, currently in the house, one on the way, and you're running multiple businesses. You know, how do you balance those demands of doing so many different things and running home life? What does that look like for you as a dad?
Well, it's kind of interesting that you asked this question because I was asked this question on a podcast not long ago at all, maybe a month ago, and my answer is going to change today a little bit. And it's a twofold answer. One is just placing a high degree of trust in my partners and my other folks that help operate some, the businesses that I own. The second part would be just being incredibly intentional with, I'm not going to call it time management. I'm going to call it calendar management. Just managing your calendar so that, not perfectly, because it's never going to work out perfectly, but managing your calendar so that you can be as close to perfect as you can get with things that are happening in your life, to be intentional to achieve the things that you want to achieve outside of work. And for me, that is spending time with my wife and my twins. Um, and in order to do that successfully as well, like, you also have to make sacrifices. So I don't play golf on the weekends. I used to before I had kids. A lot of stuff that I did on the weekends that I no longer do, because if I did them, then I would have to spend, time away from my family. And that's just a decision that I choose to make, which is to spend, my weekends basically, 98% committed to my family. And that starts with calendar management. So not taking meetings before 9 a.m., not taking meetings after maybe 4 or 4:30 p.m. Pacific time for me. And so by managing my calendar in that way, it essentially ensures that I'm going to be able to do some of the family related things, which is wake up in the morning, have breakfast with the family for, 30 or 45 minutes, help get the twins dressed, and then get myself out the door. And then on the flip side of that, I am home for dinner essentially every single night of the week. And people say, some people will kind of clap back at that and say, well, that's just not realistic for me. And it's like, no, that's not true. It absolutely is realistic. It is the decisions that you have made in your life that maybe don't allow you to get home for dinner, or maybe there's consequences if you were to get home for dinner in time. But don't fool yourself for a second that the reason that you're not home for dinner every night to have with your family is because of the decisions that you consciously make. And those obviously have direct effects on things outside of your work.
It's just to that point, right? That as a business owner, that you're going to have to make a variety of decisions. And okay, you may miss those networking events late at night that do occur, right? But the question is, how great a value add does that particularly add to your business? Or are you willing to look at growth potentially in a different way? Like if that is a value add that, may you grow a little bit slower, right? And just know that that's just what it's going to be. That, I speak to most things in life that even, it's like some employees, they want the flexibility of remote work. They want this, they want that, they want that. And I say, usually there's 3 things that come with the job and you're only going to get 2 of them. And it just is what it is. And, there's always going to be a sacrifice to be made, but glad that, you've made these decisions that, okay, that time block of, hey, I'm going to put this in the calendar and this is what's important to me. I will say, your twins, you said they're 4, right?
Yep.
Yeah. at least for me, like my oldest is 7, and then my second oldest is 5. At least at that age, you talked about golf, and I have them in golf lessons at the driving range, so it'll be coming up soon. They get back out on the golf course,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, yeah,
absolutely, man. And just to kind of add a little bit more context around some of the comments that I made, it was not always like this for me, man. When I started my first business and as a financial advisor, independent, was September of 2015. So what, 9 years ago, a little bit over 9 years ago. And that was obviously way before I had kids. Now I've been helping raise my stepson for 14 years. Um, but when I came into his life, he was just about to turn 8. So, and he spent, half of his time, call it, with his dad. So my wife and I, well, your girlfriend at the time, we had a lot of time on our hands. You know what I mean? We had one kid that we only, were responsible about 50% of the time. So we had a lot of free time on our hands. And so during that period of 2015 to 2020, so 5 years, was I home for dinner like every night and spending all my time on the weekend with my wife? Absolutely not. You know, again, we were living much more selfish lifestyles at that point because we didn't have kids to take care of. And when we did, again, he was only with us for half the time. So in that stage of my life, yeah, I was absolutely going to, happy hours, networking events, doing all kinds of stuff to build my business. I'm just in a different season of my professional, career at this point.
I guess it's kind of interesting. Definitely want to be able to dive into some other questions that are unique to you as a person and as a business owner of multiple businesses. But yeah, I'd love to expand upon that. That you spoke of, where your life is at now as a business owner, but realizing that wasn't always the case, right? And for some owners of business owners that do have growing businesses, but they're on the front end of those businesses, right? That they haven't been in it for 10 years. They haven't gotten it to a stabilization point. Do you feel like, the nature of just having to do what you said, that going out to networking events, doing all these things, really trying to, hustle and kind of build and grow something. Do you think that is required, to really get a business off the ground?
That's a good question, man. You'll hear from a lot of successful business owners that the absolute most important skill set, trait, characteristic, whatever you want to call it, for a business owner to have in the early years of running your business is essentially sales. Um, Now, as two guys that are pretty well versed in finance, you certainly more so than me. We could make an argument there that the number one reason that a lot of small businesses shut down is just poor cash management. So you got to sprinkle that in there for sure. But some of those problems can absolutely be solved if you're consistently bringing in revenue, new revenue, et cetera. So I do believe that to be true. The business owners that I see that really struggle in the early years is because they just don't have that skill set of going out and building relationships, finding partners, bringing value to other folks that they could potentially use their services, all the things that come. But those are all essentially kind of built around like having, sales as a strong skill set, that you can tap into. All the other things are important, but like if you're not selling stuff, you're not in business. Um, so I still do believe that is the most important thing that people can focus on in the early years. One of the businesses that I own, my operating partner, he didn't have that kind of a background at all, right? So he's been a great operator, but the business, him and I operating the business, really together as partners, hasn't really grown all that much. organically. Now we're making an acquisition that will push our revenue up 40 to 50% in 2025, but obviously that is not organic growth. So it's early in our careers, in our professional journeys of being business owners. Like we're probably not that focused on growth via acquisition. We want to grow organically, and so having that sales background or that sales experience, man, that's just, I'm not going to say it's essential, but it is highly required, I guess, to to really be successful and get things off the ground in a manner that is, I'll just call it sustainable.
There's different terms for it, but the reality of, there's a lot of promises out there that, oh, you can build a business, basically on 8 to 5 schedule or on your own, schedule and build a laptop business and do all this and this and that. And, yeah, I know, right. That, any one of those people saying it, I guarantee you is struggling themselves, and they are promising something, right? They're having to sell and hustle to you. But yeah, the idea that you do have to hustle a little bit, right? That it is a challenge to be a business owner, but there are deep rewards, at some point that, you now do own multiple businesses and you're building wealth, and you get to, make sure that your weekends are spent with your family and that you're cutting off at a particular time. And so, yeah, do we eventually reach goals that are great? Yeah. It's not to say that especially when you're trying to grow a business, I think it's one thing if you are, okay with, hey, I just am trying to cover my own personal lifestyle, and my lifestyle is not deep, or significant. Yeah, you could do something, but when you're trying to grow a business and you feel called and led to actually grow something that's bigger than yourself, yeah, you gotta hustle, you gotta work hard, right? Yeah, I appreciate your input in that. And, to this point, you are at a point to where you own multiple businesses, right? But I think, on this podcast, we've had people that have acquired businesses, entrepreneurship through acquisition. We've also had business owners that, they've acquired strategically, that they've bought businesses and consolidated them into their entire portfolio. And there's been very strategic purposes. I'm interested to hear, and for our audience, I want to dive in with you on, you own a financial planning wealth management firm, and you also own a tree trimming business, right? Two very, very different businesses. And I'm really interested to hear your perspective, because there's a lot out there that talks about, if you want to be successful in the business world, you're supposed to niche really hard. You're supposed to stay incredibly, incredibly focused. I don't know that applies as much in regards to portfolio investments, right? And a diversification strategy of investments, especially in something you're interested in. But I am really interested, what made you, given that you are, you run a financial plan and wealth management business, what made you want to buy a tree trimming business? Something that is so different from, what you're currently operating in. What made you want to do that?
It's kind of a culmination of a number of different things. So I'll try to be concise here. In 2020, I had been, a licensed financial advisor at that point, for, call it a decade. And I have always lived significantly below my means. So I generally save 30 to 50% of my income in a given year. So I had built up a decent, let's just call it like a stock portfolio. Okay. I built up a decent stock portfolio, and, I was 30 years old, or no, excuse me, 35 years old. And I'm like, okay, in our wealth management firm, we had been working with a number of successful small business owners for years. So I felt like I had a pretty good idea of what a fundamentally sound small business looks like. So I did feel like I had that as a major advantage. And I read Buy Then Build, I read the Harvard business book, whatever it was called, Buying a Business, and started to get plugged into that community. I'm like, this is it. This is for me. So that was probably 2019 or 2020. And so I said, all right, I'm going to go out and my next investment that I'm going to make, just like I would put money into the stock market or a mutual fund or a private real estate deal, I'm going to buy a business as an investment. And so that was 2020. Searched very informally for a couple years. By the way, I was never setting out to buy a tree business. That was not the goal. I looked at a number of different businesses over the course of about 24 months. Um, I was going to buy a couple locations for a franchise. It was a doggy daycare business that I still really like that business a lot. Um, I looked at an accounting firm, a couple other ones.
No, I'm sorry.
And I was playing pickleball with Luke, who's my partner in the tree business. And I just said, "Hey, man, this would have been November, December of 22." I said, "Hey, I've been looking for a business to buy for the last like year or two. Um, I'm really going to need someone to partner with to actually run that business day to day. What do you think?" And Luke was like, "Let's do it." And not even 90 days later, we were under contract to buy Nevada Tree Service. And the reason that we liked Nevada Tree Service had nothing to do with tree work, and it had everything to do with how they had built the business. By all standards, it was still very small. It was, when we bought it, it was 6 employees, call it $1 million a year of revenue. Um, really, 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 really healthy margins hitting the bottom line because they had no debt. They used their property as their yard, they worked from home, etc. But what we discovered in diligence was that it really was a great small business. I mean, just a really, really good little business. And it still is to this day. We've grown the team now. We got a few more team members. This year we'll do 1.2, 1.3. So we've grown the business, a little bit. But we are in the process of making our second acquisition, which will add about 500,000 of revenue. So it'll be a nice little bump. But yeah, it had absolutely nothing to do with the tree business. It's funny because to this day, my neighbors, my friends, associates will be like, "Hey, let me ask you like a question about like this tree. This is what I have going on." And I'm like, "Dude,"
I don't know squat.
I was like, I'll answer you, but like, don't hold me to this because I still have never done any tree work. I've never gone up in a bucket. I still don't know how to start a chainsaw, so I don't know how helpful I'll be, but I'll give it my best shot. Um, but yeah, Luke runs that business day to day. He's done a phenomenal job of doing so. I still kind of manage the finances. I help with sales and marketing because those are some of my strong suits. But yeah, man, it's turned out to be a really good business. It's interesting because the wealth management industry, I would imagine you could probably argue is one of the physically safest industries you could probably ever be in. You're just sitting essentially, at a desk behind a computer screen all day in a nice air conditioned office. And tree trimming and removal is actually one of the absolute most dangerous jobs in the entire world. Like it's definitely on the top 10 list because you're sending, I say guys because it's,
Yeah, it's a lot of guys.
It's all
Yeah.
guys, but you're sending guys up trees or way off the ground in a bucket truck with a chainsaw attached to them, so it's incredibly dangerous. But I will give a little bit different of an answer, or just I'll piggyback on my own response, which is, as you know very well, in the line of work that we're in, it's incredibly intimate, the relationships that you have with the clients that you work with, right? There's a lot of ongoing communication. There's very regular meetings multiple times a year, sometimes even more than that. So it's a really intimate relationship that you have with your clients. That's why like one solo financial advisor can really effectively only serve 100, maybe 150 households. You go above that and it's like the service just goes down the drain. And so I got to a point in my career where I was like, um, I need to do something different. And I knew that if I was going to buy a business as an investment, that it was not going to be a similar business where it's a really focused, intimate one-on-one relationship. So I was actually, I was intrigued, but also wanted something that was going to be a little bit more transactional in nature, because I just wanted something different. Just the repetitiveness of meeting with the same people year after year after year after year after year and having the same conversations. Although I still am, really close with every single client that I work with. Now my partner mostly serves, but I just got to a point where I'm like, I just am not going to do this for the rest of my career. I want to do something different. And so that also led to my decision making around buying a business with a service similar to the tree work.
Yeah, makes sense. That yeah, I mean, right as we're both entrepreneurs, and there's still very emotional decisions attached to our decision making process, right? Like not everything is a purely logical, like, oh, this has to be purely strategic. I mean, sounds like it somewhat was, but there was some emotional, it was emotionally driven behind it too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The reality of, this was a bit of an emotional decision for yourself, right? And as a business owner, that yeah, it's tough because we want every decision to be purely business strategic, right? But it still has to be driven by what's in our own heart and what's in what we desire to, right? But um, I'm interested to understand because you are managing two very different businesses, like you said, the models themselves. That in wealth management, it's highly personal, relationship driven, having touch points with clients. Well, the tree trimming business is much different, right? Two very different businesses in regards to how sales works, how client management works. That's the thing is like, there's not a whole lot of strategic alignment here. That you did make a bit of an emotional decision as to what you spoke about, and so I'm interested, like, how are you managing, the tree trimming business part time? Like you said, you're involved in finances, you're involved in the sales and marketing aspects, but how are you pulling this off of being involved in something so much different?
Yeah, just having great business partners, man. That is essentially what it boils down to. Just to be clear, um, there's a lot of talk these days, man, in the I'll just call it the SMB world. Um, there's a lot of talk around buying a business, collecting the mailbox money, just plugging an operator into the business and just
Nothing
sitting back
down.
and
Yeah.
just, yeah, just while you're sitting on the beach, drinking Mai Tais, the checks are just rolling in and you're, just, yeah, I got to pop on a call here or there, but,
Yeah.
um,
And
so
then
there's a lot of
reality
talk
hits.
about, yeah, about that. And, does it happen like in the SMB world? Sure, it does. But you don't see, we don't see Bigfoot all that often, but we do see him. Um, so so my partner Luke runs that business day to day. He's the general manager of the business. Um, I would consider myself more of an advisor to the business. I do not have an active role in the business. Does the staff and the team know me? Absolutely, they do. I have relationships with all of them. Do they reach out to me for anything at all? No, they do not, unless like somebody calls and says, like, asks for me specifically. So I do not have an active role in that business. Um, so to help lead and guide and advise Luke in that business, I probably spend, I'd say, 2 or 3 hours a week on that business.
Got it.
So very minimal time. That was not always the case. I was the one that drove the bus behind the acquisition and diligence and the post close, transition. So obviously, I was much more heavily involved in things when we acquired the company. But since then, for the last, call it, because we've been operating the business for 18 months. Um, for the last, year, essentially, I've been at probably 2 to 3 hours a week. I meet with Luke. We talk about, what's going on in the business. We identify the things that we need to focus on, and we put kind of a plan together to do that. Um, and then on the other side of things, my business partner in the wealth management firm, he has taken over most of the client service work. So he is mostly meeting with our clients now, doing financial planning, investment management, retirement planning, insurance planning, all the stuff that we do. He is handling that aspect of it. And then for all the business owner clients that we have that we're doing business planning related services for, I am still very much involved in those relationships and those engagements. But my time in the wealth management firm has been cut down significantly as well, because now I've got a new project where most of my time and effort is being diverted to.
So a lot revolves in both of these businesses having really wonderful partners, right? Like having your trusted partners that are excelling in their particular areas of the business so that you can plug in your areas of excellence, right? And um, you know, I've also like in our CFO services business, we have also seen many partnerships that it does not work out, right? And hindsight's 2020. I give an example, like we've had one client where he got into partnership with a couple other people, but especially one of them, definitely the idea man, and definitely the guy that comes up with the fresh ideas. uh, that follow through is really poor. And then to turn out, when they actually went to go get, banking and to go get credit, that the guy had, filed for bankruptcy a couple years earlier. And so there goes any chance of getting any credit, in that business without, the other owners or the other investors pledging personal guarantees and basically taking all the financial risk in the business against that debt. I just, it's just like a case study on how to pick a business partner, right? But I'm really interested to understand, you have two instances in which you have partners. How do you pick them? I mean, this is really important, right? And I think there's a lot of bad advice out there. I think, to your point, one was on the pickleball court. And so that's probably, number one thing is that you got to find a pickleball player, right? You got to find a pickleball partner. I say that because I love pickleball. But I'm really interested to understand how have you picked them so far?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have three full-time business partners now. I've got Luke, I've got Austin, and I've got Brian. I'm not just saying this because they're my business partners, but they are three of the best dudes that I've ever met in my life. I would trust any one of these three dudes. If my wife and I died in a car accident and any one of these three dudes stepped up to raise my children for me, I would be eternally grateful to any of them, and I would not blink an eye as to them raising my children. That's how much I trust them. Now, in order to get to that place of trust, the only formula that I can articulate in words is 50 to 100 hours. You need to spend 50 to 100 hours with a person doing numerous different things to really get to know them, to understand how they act in different situations, circumstances, experiences. And you cannot do that over 2 or 3 lunch meetings. You've got to go spend time with them and their family. They need to spend time with you and your family. You need to go out to meals and see how they treat the wait staff. You need to go on vacations. You need to be involved in situations where things get a little tense or uncomfortable so you can see how they react in those. So you got to experience the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And to do that, my opinion is you need to spend at least 50 hours, but up to 100 hours with somebody before you can have a really good assessment of what that person is like as a human being. So Luke and
I'm
I
glad
had,
you put a metric behind it. Like, I mean, that is really nice to have a metric behind it because I want to hear more from you. But yeah, I just want to emphasize that the metric, that much time is a significant amount of time, right? I mean, that is a whole lot of time with somebody, but actually putting a metric in place for reality of really what it takes to get to know a person, this is relevant. Hardly anybody talks about this.
yeah, yeah. And because I've been asked this question before, and so I've just kind of like reflected on it. I'm like, what does it actually take? And so I started like thinking back, and my partner Austin and I had been getting to know each other for years. I had brought him in on some client engagements, so we had worked together on a couple client engagements before we became partners. Luke and I, by the way, Luke and I are neighbors as well. We literally live two doors down from each other. Like I can throw a baseball and I could bust out one of his windows. And I've actually almost done that because Luke and I actually play catch out in the street all the time. um, and then Brian and I got connected in November, December of last year. Brian is my partner on the private equity fund that we have spun up. Um, Brian and I met each other about a year ago, and then had a weekly standing meeting. He came out to Vegas, multiple times for 8 hours a day. And then we basically solidified our business relationship in, call it like May, June. So spent 6 months and probably, I think we estimated it was like 120 to 150 hours over that period of 6 months together before we solidified our partnership. And by that time, just 6 short months into getting to know Brian, because we had spent so much time together and been in, I met his family, he met mine. Obviously, we had a bunch of meals together. We had done, hobbies together. And so I had a very, very clear picture of who Brian was because you can't hide who you are when you've spent that much time with somebody. You go out to a couple lunch meetings with somebody, like you can keep those skeletons pretty well hidden. But when you've spent 50 to 100 hours with somebody, they can no longer hide those skeletons, because there is stuff that is just going to come out as your relationship strengthens to where, they get more comfortable, there's higher trust involved. And when that happens, you start to see other sides of people and you're like, okay, well, wow. We went out to lunch at 12 and man, he had 3 margaritas and, freaking, left his phone number for the waitress and he's married with 3 kids. Like, wow, that was really sketchy, dude. Like, that's probably not someone that I want to spend any more time with, or whatever the situation is. And, you know, however they align with your, values, but certainly identifying somebody that doesn't align with your values, that will definitely transpire if you spend 50 to 100 hours with somebody.
It's funny because I went to an MBA program that was focused on entrepreneurship, and I remember like sometimes they would just like their whole goal was to actually have businesses start up out of that program, right? I mean, that was how they were going to get additional MBA candidates through the door paying top dollar is that, whoa, look at these startups coming out of here. Look at these brands and everything. And so they literally would put us in a classroom and they said, just start talking to people and just form a business together. Like, I couldn't help but think, I'm like, what? Yeah, like, this is somebody you're practically going to be married to. Like, with the amount of time that you're going to end up spending and the risk you're going to take together financially, et cetera, et cetera. This is the closest thing that you can get to a marriage, and nobody would date this way. So why in the world would we start a business this way, right? And nobody would start a marriage in this format. And so but I've also never heard anybody put it like, to put a metric to it. And I would agree with you that, I think, even then some people have, a few short meetings and, and they get all hyped up on the idea, but, how many times do they talk about, investors invest in the team itself or the entrepreneurs themselves, right? And the ideas are dime a dozen, execution's everything. But you can only execute if that team is cohesive and that you trust each other and that team is excellent. And so the team itself, you can do a variety of different businesses, whether it's tree trimming, like you said, like you can do a variety of different stuff. You can do dog grooming or dog, overnight, dog hotel or whatever. But the reality is you can do it with anybody, but as long as you have the right person with you, you can do a million things, right? So I'm glad that you put a metric to it because I think it's relevant. And I think what's sad is, a lot of our audience, they're lower middle market business owners that, they built a primary business. They may have built it on their own, or they may have had partners, but they've built a primary business and they're kind of getting into that, period of wealth where all of a sudden they have extra cash that they need to figure out what to do with. And they want to go accomplish some other objectives. You're still talking about a visionary founder that loves to take on new challenges, and their primary business may be somewhat of a plateau point. I would argue otherwise, but they ultimately, they're looking for that next stage of growth, and they're considering making those outside investments in their entire portfolio of things. And the biggest thing I've seen is they get in and they hop into bed with just terrible partners that end up in terrible situations. So I'm glad that you put a metric to it. That's really wonderful. Well, Landon, you've covered a lot for us, and I appreciate, you providing your context and your perspective to it. I'm interested kind of as we begin to wrap up. We've talked a lot about partnerships and about picking the right partner, and I can't underestimate, how important this is, right? But you are a wealth manager and you decided to invest in businesses that, while a lot of advice out there is place your money in the stock market index, place your money in the stock market, place your money in real estate, do this and this and that. There's all these different investment alternative options. And one of the ones that you chose was buying a business. And then, like you said, you're spinning up a private equity fund that I'm sure will invest in additional businesses, right? And so I'm interested to understand, especially from a wealth manager, why have you chosen to go down this route?
When I told my wife that I was going to buy a business, she was like, "Wait, what? Like, are you crazy? Why would you do that? Like, why don't you just put your money into the stock market?" So the reassurance that I gave her, and I guess I think this is sound advice for any, entrepreneur as well. Before I went out and did something like, as a lot of people would see as being incredibly risky, right? Go out and buy a business in an industry that you know absolutely zero about, zero. And nor did I ever intend to learn about the industry because I knew that that would be the responsibility of my operating partner. When I did that, I mentioned earlier that I've always lived well below my means. So I had built up what I'm going to call like a foundational investment portfolio. So most of the stuff is stuff that you can liquidate at the click of a mouse, right? Stocks, mutual funds, ETFs, bonds, for the most part. Hardly anybody buys individual bonds anymore, but in theory, it's the same type of deal. So I had built up a pretty meaningful to me. I had built up a meaningful investment portfolio, primarily comprised of liquid marketable securities, so that I've got that to fall back on. Oh, and by the way, I had also built up a decent little cash reserve, right? So that I've got a financial backstop to where if I went out to buy this business, and it did not work out for whatever reason, it's not going to wipe me out. Are they going to, did I have to sign a PG for my home and some other assets? I absolutely did. And if I would have defaulted on my loan for Nevada Tree Service, would they have come after those assets? Yeah, they probably would have. Would that put me and my family out on the street? Absolutely would not have. So I think that's really, really important. You're going to meet entrepreneurs that like, they don't think like that. It's not even a concern to them where it's like, they're just burning the boats as they go deeper out into sea because there's no turning back. There's no relying on this or that. There's no fallback. There is one direction we are heading, and it is boom or it is bust. That is not me at all. I am, I've learned to never say never. But I am most likely not going to be the guy that's going to build $100 million business. That's not me. No desire to do anything like that. Because you build $100 million business, you are absolutely going to be giving up your mornings and your nights and your weekends to build something like that. There's no getting around that. So that's not me. So I'm never going to be the boom or bust guy. I built up a nice, very diversified investment portfolio, which consisted not just marketable securities, but private real estate deals, investment in, holding company models, in funds, in SPVs, all kinds of stuff. And so I felt very comfortable to know that if I went out and bought a business as an investment, even if it failed and I had to close it down, that it is not going to put my family and I out on the street. And for 95% of people out there, that is going to be the right strategy. And again, for those boom or bust people, they don't want a fallback because it almost like demotivates them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But that's just not me, man. So I had to make sure that we were in a great spot, whether I succeeded or whether I failed.
A lot of business owners we talk about are not as calculated as you are, as to that point that if you were going to provide a personal guarantee on a line of debt, that what is the total amount at risk here, that if we didn't pay this back, and if I had to guarantee this thing and we had to go into my net assets, my net personal assets, that I still get to keep my house and I still get to do this and this and that, yeah, it'll wash out quite a bit, but generally I'm going to keep my house and I'm going to be able to keep my family safe, and that's okay. And that's really interesting because just a lot of business owners are not looking from that perspective. Like sometimes they sign that personal guarantee and they don't know what they're signing, right? They don't even know their current situation. They don't know, okay, this is really what I have at risk here. And so, yeah, you're a calculated man. So, yeah, really, really appreciate your insight here. There's obvious reasons why you've made the investment decisions you've made. Love to hear just, the personal side of it, and what made you personally want to invest in it, but also you've provided a lot of insight here to us in regards to partnerships, right, and how to pick them, and how to really evaluate a partner. And so I'm just so glad that we've been able to really expand upon this and get your experience, because you are unique in the sense of having a business way outside of what your normal primary business activities are. That oftentimes we're talking on the ag side of some of our clients that they're buying farmland, but the intent is it's supplementing their primary business. A lot of them, one way or another, their other objectives are supplementing their primary business, and yours is different. And so I'm just so grateful for the insight that you've provided, that this is totally doable, but you've taken it in a very calculated way. And so, and how you provided advice to others here of how to do that in a calculated method. So just really appreciate having you on, Landon. This was great.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate you saying all that. And great to see you and connect with you again, man. It's been too long. So thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
No, appreciate you. Tell our audience where they can find you if they want to learn more about Landon and what you're doing, or to seek out some of your wealth management services, or we may have listeners here that may be interested in becoming that next partner, right? That they may need to go out to the pickleball court in Las Vegas with you. Tell us where they can find you, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Easiest place is going to be LinkedIn. Landon Mance on LinkedIn. Dad to twins is the first line of my bio. You can't miss me.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much again for joining us today, Landon. Really appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, thanks a lot, brother. Appreciate you, man.